When my parents raised their voices and told me, "We're raising your rent because you can afford it," something inside me snapped. Not with anger, not with tears, just a quiet, cold clarity. For nearly 7 years, I had been living in the same cramped apartment with them, a temporary stay that turned into a slow, suffocating sentence. I was supposed to move out after 6 months, save up while working as a back-end developer. I paid rent, I paid utilities, and I stayed invisible. Meanwhile, Emma, my older sister, floated through life without a bill to her name. Charming, artistic Emma, the family's golden girl. She jumped from painting classes to photography gigs to yoga certifications, none of which stuck. She married Daniel, a man who talked big dreams but had smaller paychecks. When they showed up at our door, broke and with a toddler on their hip, my parents didn't blink. They rolled out the red carpet. No one asked me if I minded living with screaming kids and someone else's bath bombs covering the bathroom sink. No one reduced my rent to make space for them either. If anything, they just took more. When I earned my degree in computer science, the celebration lasted about an hour. When Emma sold a single photo to a local cafe, they threw her a dinner party, and I stayed. I stayed out of duty, guilt, habit, I'm not even sure anymore. But that family meeting, where they looked me dead in the eye and told me to fork over 40% more each month, just so Emma and Daniel could keep playing house for free. That's when the last fraying thread inside me finally snapped. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was a walking ATM machine with a pulse. And the worst part, I had allowed it to happen for far too long. The house, no, the apartment, wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to the chaos of Emma's kids screaming at cartoons on full blast, to Daniel's sneakers abandoned in the hallway, to the sharp chemical smell of Sarah's beauty products leaking from the bathroom into my bedroom. I started spending more hours in coffee shops, burning through my savings just to find a few hours of quiet to work. And still, I convinced myself this was temporary. Still, I swallowed it when my rent was raised, first to cover extra utilities, then again because expenses were rising. I paid, silently, while Emma and Daniel paid nothing but lip service. When they had another child, squeezing what little space we had even tighter, my parents didn't blink. It wasn't their problem. It was my responsibility, my privilege, to help. That's how they framed it, that twisted family loyalty card they loved to play. Things started disappearing. My premium streaming accounts, shared without asking. My noise-cancelling headphones, found weeks later, broken under a pile of Daniel's workout clothes. My gaming console magically became the family entertainment system. I was losing everything piece by piece, my privacy, my peace, my money, even my identity. But the final blow came during another one of those miserable family meetings. I sat at the chipped kitchen table while my parents flanked each other like a united front, and Emma sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone, not even pretending to care. "Maya, starting next month," my father said, adjusting his glasses. "Your rent will be $1,200. Plus, we're setting up a family emergency fund to help with Daniel's car payments and daycare costs for the kids." I blinked. $1,200 for a bedroom I barely fit in anymore. And a family emergency fund that suspiciously sounded like Maya's money saves Emma again, I asked calmly. "What's Emma contributing?" My mother's face stiffened like drying concrete. "Your sister is focusing on her family right now," she said sharply. "You know how hard it is with 2 young children." I turned to Emma. She didn't even look up from her screen. At that moment, something inside me crystallized, a realization so pure and undeniable that it almost made me laugh out loud. It was never going to change. I wasn't their daughter. I was their plan B. I wasn't family. I was finance. And right then, quietly, I made the most important decision of my life. I was done. I didn't slam any doors. I didn't shout or cry. I just sat through the rest of that family meeting, nodding in all the right places, and inside I started drawing blueprints for my exit. Over the next few days, I became a ghost in my own life, moving through familiar spaces with a growing detachment. They thought I was sulking. I let them. It was better they thought me passive, obedient, predictable. It gave me room to act. First came the money. I opened a new bank account at a completely different bank, one with no connection to anything my parents had access to. Over the years, under the guise of helping me manage my finances, they had kept casual tabs on my statements. Not anymore. I began diverting my paychecks there, quietly. No sudden movements, no alarms. Second came the search. I spent my lunch breaks scrolling through listings, filtering for security, for peace, for space. It took 2 grueling weeks, but I finally found it. A 1-bedroom apartment, 20 minutes away, tucked into a small gated community. Far enough to deter casual visits, close enough not to tip anyone off too early. It wasn't luxury, it was freedom. Then came the stuff, the tangible pieces of my life that I refused to leave behind. Every morning, I left for work with my laptop and a backpack. But that backpack was a Trojan horse. Inside were pieces of my real life, my important documents, my passport, family jewellery gifted by my late grandmother, the external hard drives holding every project I'd ever built. I started renting a small storage unit on the edge of town, carefully moving items there, little by little. 1 book at a time, 1 framed photo at a time, 1 memory at a time. Third came the technology. I logged into every shared account, Netflix, Spotify, Disney+, everything, and changed passwords, removing all other profiles. I wasn't funding their entertainment anymore. I transferred my phone number off the family plan to a personal carrier. It took a few hours of paperwork and some side eye from the clerk, but once it was done, I felt a coil inside me unwind for the first time in years. And then came the audit. I made a list. Every object that was mine, purchased with my money, the massive smart TV in the living room, the high-end coffee machine in the kitchen, the backyard grill I bought for summer barbecues they used to pretend I was invited to, the router system that powered all the devices in the house, except mine. If I couldn't prove ownership clearly, I decided I'd leave it behind. No legal grey areas, no arguments, no attachments. Meanwhile, the first smiled through dinners. I nodded when Emma casually asked if I could maybe babysit more often to help out. I bit my tongue when Daniel left dirty dishes piled in the sink and grumbled about how stressful his life was. I stayed silent, but inside the clock was ticking. Finally, I chose the perfect weekend. There was a cousin's wedding 3 hours away, a big, splashy affair. Emma, Daniel, and the kids were going, of course. My parents insisted I come too, but I manufactured an urgent client emergency at work. For once, my tech career served as a perfect excuse they couldn't argue with. The morning they left, I barely slept. At 9 a.m. sharp, the moving company I'd quietly hired pulled into the complex. I greeted them at the door with a list of exactly what was to be packed. My bedroom furniture, the electronics clearly mine, the labelled boxes I had hidden away over the past weeks. No family heirlooms, no grey area gifts, just the things I had earned, the pieces of myself. The living room TV was unplugged and rolled away without a word. The coffee machine disappeared into bubble wrap. The router came down, and with it, the Wi-Fi died, like a final exhale from a house that had sucked the life out of me for too long. I cleaned my now empty room, one last walk through, one last glance at the shell of what had once been home. Before leaving, I placed an envelope on the kitchen table. Inside, my house keys, a printed letter, short, emotionless. I've moved out. The items I've taken were purchased with my own money. I am no longer part of the family phone plan. Do not contact me for financial assistance again. The words were surgical. No pleas, no anger, no sadness. And then I locked the door behind me one last time. I drove straight to my new apartment, a small stack of moving boxes trailing me like little ghosts. I unpacked slowly, savouring each breath of independence, every slice of silence that was mine alone. That night, I sat cross-legged on the floor, eating takeout straight from the container, staring at the blank walls with a stupid, exhausted smile on my face. I was free. It wasn't loud, or dramatic, or cinematic. It was quiet, methodical, patient. It was, in every way that mattered, perfect. And I knew, before my family even set foot back into that now half-empty apartment, that a war was about to begin. But, for once, I wouldn't be fighting. I'd already won. By the time Emma, Daniel, and my parents returned from the wedding, the apartment barely resembled the place they had left behind. No TV buzzing in the background, no internet humming through their devices, no Maya trapped in the corner of a house that was never truly hers. The first signs came quickly, my inbox flooded within an hour. Emails, social media DMs, even desperate messages on LinkedIn, because I had blocked all of their numbers the moment I left, and now they were panicking. My mother's messages started first, a wild oscillation between heartbroken pleas and volcanic rage. How could you do this to us? We're your family. You've destroyed everything. My father's were sharper, colder, less about sadness, more about threats. You have no idea what you've done. You'll regret abandoning your family. And then there was Emma, my golden child sister, who barely noticed my existence for years, suddenly remembered I was real, except her concerns weren't about me. They were about things. Where's the TV? The kids need it for their shows. What about the Wi-Fi? How are we supposed to work without it? You're selfish, Maya. Not once did any of them ask if I was okay. I didn't reply. I didn't explain. I didn't defend myself. I owed them nothing. Instead, I sent one single detached email addressed to my parents. The items I took were purchased with my own money. I have documentation to support this. Any further attempts to harass or threaten me will result in legal action, including a restraining order. This is the final communication I will initiate. Simple, unemotional, non-negotiable. The days that followed were a strange mixture of guilt and relief. Every instinct I'd been conditioned into, be a good daughter, don't make waves, sacrifice yourself, clawed at the edges of my peace. But underneath that noise, something stronger had taken root, resolve. In the quiet of my new apartment, for the first time in years, I could hear my own thoughts. No children screaming down the hallway. No passive-aggressive guilt trips at the dinner table. No family meetings where love was measured in dollars. Just silence. And the sound of my own life beginning. Of course, they didn't give up that easily. 3 days after the move, I spotted my mother through the glass doors of my office building, red-faced, pacing, arguing with the security guard. I had already briefed my manager and security on the situation. They turned her away before she could even step inside. I watched her from the break room window. She was shouting, waving her arms, flushed with fury. Security threatened to call the police if she didn't leave. Eventually, she did, shoulders slumped, mouth still moving, a storm contained behind the glass. That evening, another email arrived from my father, dripping with venom. You embarrassed your mother. You humiliated this family. I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it without a second thought. No response, no engagement, no weakness. Week 1 passed in a haze of nervous energy. I installed new locks, added a camera to my front door, changed all my online passwords again. Every day I expected retaliation, a confrontation, a public ambush, something dramatic. But nothing came. Instead, the silence grew, and with it, so did my sense of power. By the second week, the cracks in their perfect facade started to show. An email from my mother, less rage, more desperation. The phone service was shut off. We have no way to call anyone. This is unsafe, Maya. You need to fix it. Ah. So now my financial support wasn't selfish. Now it was a safety issue. I didn't answer. I didn't even smile. I just moved on with my day, sipping my coffee in the quiet, sunlit corner of my kitchen, the only space that was truly mine. Week 3 unleashed the flying monkeys, cousins, family friends, random acquaintances. People who hadn't said 2 words to me in years now filled my inbox and social media DMs. How could you abandon your parents like this? They did everything for you. You're being so cruel. Clearly, my parents had crafted a story, a fiction where I was the ungrateful daughter who had stolen property, fled without notice, and left them destitute. I replied to only a few, in brief, factual tones. I paid rent for 7 years without missing a month. I was supporting an entire household, while others paid nothing. The items I took were legally mine, with receipts to prove it. Most didn't answer after that. Some offered awkward apologies. Most just quietly disappeared. The first real cracks in their financial situation came exactly 1 month after my departure. Aunt Rachel, the only person in the entire family who had reached out to ask how I was doing instead of what I had done, called me one evening. Her voice was low, almost conspiratorial. Maya, she said, your parents are in trouble. Apparently the truth was leaking out. They weren't the financially stable, benevolent parents they pretended to be. They had been living off my rent for years, barely scraping by, hiding their struggles from the extended family. Without my contributions, the mortgage was slipping. Bills were piling up. Their credit cards were maxed. They're trying to borrow money from everyone now, Aunt Rachel said. But people are asking questions. Questions they didn't have good answers for. I thanked her, feeling an emotion I couldn't quite name. Not satisfaction, not revenge. Just justice. They had built a house of cards on my back. And now, without me to carry the weight, it was finally collapsing under its own lies. I hung up the phone, closed my eyes, and breathed deep. It wasn't over yet. But for the first time, it wasn't my problem to solve. 2 months into my new life, the emails slowed. The rage had burned itself out, replaced by something quieter, something almost pitiable. Desperation. Daniel's name popped up in my inbox one afternoon, a surprise among the flood of unread spam. For a moment, I debated whether to open it. Curiosity won. It wasn't venom. It wasn't even blame. It was panic. Your parents said we have to start paying rent. Emma is furious. We don't know what to do. You've ruined everything. Not a word asking if I was okay. Not a hint of apology. Only fear for their own comfort. It was almost funny, in a sad sort of way. All the years of being invisible, unimportant, and now my absence loomed so large it was unravelling their lives. I didn't respond. By month 3, Aunt Rachel reached out again, her voice tinged with a mix of sadness and quiet triumph. "They're 3 months behind," she said. "Foreclosure notices are starting. They're selling anything they can, furniture, electronics, even some of the heirlooms they'd once insisted were too precious for me to touch. Gone." Meanwhile, Emma had been forced into reality too. She landed a job at a local print shop, a far cry from her grand ambitions of being a famous artist. They downsized to a cramped 2-bedroom apartment, no longer cushioned by my silent, endless contributions. And me? I flourished. Without the financial black hole draining my energy, my savings grew. I redecorated my new place slowly, cozy throw blankets, soft lighting, a small but growing library of books. I actually had time to read. The silence that once felt alien now wrapped around me like a safe cocoon. I slept through the night for the first time in years. No wailing toddlers, no angry shouting matches through paper-thin walls, no passive-aggressive guilt trips in the hallway, just peace. I poured myself into work. Without constant distractions and resentment clawing at my brain, my productivity soared. Within 5 months, I earned a promotion, a title I had fought hard for, but had never truly believed I could achieve while living under their roof. I even started dating. Nothing serious yet, but enough to remind me that there was life beyond survival, people who could see me, not just use me. At the 6-month mark, I received something I never expected, a formal letter from my parents. It wasn't handwritten, no, that would be too personal. It was typed, carefully worded, scrubbed of any real emotion, a kind of apology, an acknowledgement that perhaps their expectations of me had been unfair, that mistakes were made, that they hoped to rebuild trust. Reading between the lines was easy. They needed help, financially, emotionally, socially. I sat with the letter for a long time before deciding how to respond. This time, I didn't let guilt make the decision for me. I discussed it with my therapist, something else I'd invested in after reclaiming my financial freedom. We crafted a response together, short, clear, firm. I am open to rebuilding a relationship slowly, starting with occasional phone calls. Any discussions about financial support are permanently off the table. Any attempts at guilt, manipulation, or disrespect will result in the immediate end of communication. I will never move back in, nor will I support Emma or Daniel financially in any way. I sent it and turned off my phone, went for a walk, breathed in the sharp, clean air of a life no one else controlled anymore. The next morning, my mother called. For the first time in my memory, her voice was small, subdued, no demands, no dramatic sobs. She accepted my terms. The conversation was awkward, full of long silences and clumsy small talk. At one point, she slipped, started to mention how difficult things have been for Emma lately, but caught herself. Changed the subject. I didn't remind her. I didn't offer help. I let the silence do the work. I don't know what the future holds with them. Maybe one day there will be real reconciliation. Maybe not. I do know one thing with absolute certainty. I will never be their ATM again. I built a life from the rubble they left me, brick by brick, day by day. A life where love isn't a transaction, where family isn't measured by sacrifice. Looking around my small, sunlit apartment, the plants thriving by the windows, the books lining the shelves, the faint sound of a coffee shop playlist humming from my speakers, I realized something. I didn't just escape. I rebuilt, and for the first time in my entire life, I chose myself, and it was enough. It was more than enough. Story 2. "You're just dead weight around here," my sister Mara hissed, tossing a designer tote onto my bed, like she already owned it. Her husband, Trent, chimed in from the doorway, smirking. "Honestly, no one wants you here, Drew." I didn't reply. What was the point? Instead, I stuffed my essentials into an overnight bag. Clothes, laptop, chargers, the necessities. I told myself I wasn't running away. I was just making space for them, for myself, whatever excuse made it easier to breathe. The next morning, I moved out. And that's when their perfect little plan began to fall apart. 8 months ago, my dad suffered a massive stroke that left him partially paralyzed. Mom couldn't afford to quit her job. Her insurance covered Dad's rehab. And me? Well, working remote meant I could be there during the day, making sure he had someone around. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy, but it felt right. So, yeah, being 29 and back in my childhood bedroom wasn't exactly how I pictured adulthood. But family's family, right? Mara and Trent didn't see it that way. They floated in maybe once a month, all smiles, carrying overpriced bakery boxes like that made up for their absence. Until one night, I found them whispering in the kitchen at 2:00 a.m. I was just trying to grab a glass of water, but the second I hit the last stair, I heard Mara's voice, sharp, insistent. "The market's perfect right now," she said. "We just have to make them believe it's the best option." Trent's response was a low rumble. "Drew's the issue. He's always been Daddy's boy." I froze, mug halfway to my mouth. Their words slid under my skin like ice water. They sounded exactly like they did when we were kids, scheming for a bigger allowance, a later curfew. Only this time, the stakes were our parents' home. The next morning, Mara staged her little breakfast announcement. "We're selling our house," she chirped, reaching across the table to squeeze Trent's hand. Mom nearly dropped the spatula she was wielding like a sword over a stack of pancakes. "But you love that house," she said, blinking rapidly. Trent picked up the baton. "We've been thinking about family, especially with Dad's condition. We want to be closer." Dad, sitting quietly in his wheelchair, gave them a look. The stroke might have slowed his speech, but it hadn't dulled his instincts. Mara smiled a little too wide. "We were thinking, temporarily, of course, we could move in here, help out. You know." And there it was, the catch. I caught the flicker of a glance Trent shot at me barely a second, but enough. The kind of look you miss if you're naive. I wasn't naive anymore. "And Drew's room would be perfect," Mara said, all honey and fake concern. "He works remote. He can find somewhere else easily." The kitchen went silent. Only the sad hiss of a forgotten pancake on the griddle filled the void. Mum turned off the stove with a mechanical sort of care. "Drew has been here, taking care of your father every single day," she said slowly. "But think practically," Trent said smoothly. "2 healthy adults are better than 1. Plus, we'll help with expenses." I stabbed my pancake half-heartedly and kept chewing. They thought they were so clever. Over the next week, Mara and Trent became fixtures at the house, popping in unannounced, wandering around like they were already co-owners. I found Trent in Dad's study twice, once looking for a pen, and once just exploring. "Sure, buddy." Their comments started small, like tiny knives. "Must be nice, living rent-free. Don't you want your own place at your age?" Always when Mum and Dad were out of earshot. Always dripping in false concern. But the breaking point came during Dad's evening exercises. I was helping him stretch when Mara barged in, Trent hot on her heels. "We need to talk," she said, voice high and tight. I helped Dad settle into his chair and turned to face them. Trent blocked the door like I might bolt. "You're just a burden," Mara said bluntly. "You're holding this family back." Trent folded his arms. "Almost 30. Living with your parents. Pathetic." I looked at them, really looked. Mara's makeup couldn't mask the dark circles under her eyes. Trent's shirt was rumpled, his watchless wrist twitching. They were desperate. That was the real tell. I didn't argue. I didn't fight. I just nodded, turned around, and walked upstairs. By midnight, I was checked into a long-term hotel 2 towns over. But before I left, I made 2 moves. 1, I ordered discreet security cameras and set them up around the house. For Dad's safety, I told Mum. She didn't even hesitate to say yes. 2, I called Dad's bank and flagged his accounts for suspicious activity. Gut instinct. And a history of watching Mara get whatever she wanted by lying better than anyone else in the room. I left the house quietly the next morning. Mara and Trent practically skipped into my old room, already making plans for new curtains and carpet swatches. Meanwhile, I watched from my hotel room, sipping burnt coffee and flipping through camera feeds on my laptop. They thought they'd won. They didn't know the game had just started. The first night away, I barely slept. Hotel pillows are stiff in that special kind of way that makes you miss even the lumpiest mattress at home. I kept flipping between security feeds, half waiting for something. Anything. At around 11 p.m, I caught them. Mara and Trent, in my old room, door shut, thinking they had privacy. The camera wasn't perfect, just enough to see the outlines, the tension, the way Trent paced like a caged animal. The audio was scratchy, but I caught enough to turn my stomach inside out. "We're out of time," Trent muttered, raking his hand through his hair. "Foreclosure notice says 2 weeks." Mara was sitting on the bed, head in her hands. I know. But forging Dad's signature, it's survival," he snapped. "We get the refinance approved, pay off the debts, and no one's the wiser. Otherwise, it's bankruptcy, eviction, ruined." I sat there, heart hammering. They weren't moving in to help Dad. They were moving in to gut the house. Turns out, Mara and Trent hadn't just fallen on hard times, they'd burned their entire lives down behind closed doors. Bad investments, shady business deals, debts stacked to the rafters. Their house wasn't for sale, it was about to be repossessed. The family first act. Pure theatre. I wasn't their biggest obstacle. I was just the last chess piece they needed off the board. And the worst part, they were targeting Dad's retirement accounts too, trying to get signatures under the guise of helping with medical bills. If Dad or Mum signed anything without understanding it, Mara and Trent could legally strip them clean. My stomach twisted. I wasn't paranoid. I was right. The next morning, fueled by equal parts rage and black coffee, I called Dad's bank again. This time, I went higher straight to their corporate fraud department. Explained everything. The bank manager, bless her, didn't waste a second. She flagged every account, froze any new activity, and set up alerts for anything suspicious. Then I called an elder law attorney. By noon, I was sitting in a leather chair that smelled like old books and battle plans, watching him scribble notes furiously as I laid everything out. When I finished, he leaned back, steepled his fingers, and said the words that locked everything into place. "This isn't just wrong," he said. "This is criminal, financial elder abuse, fraud, identity theft." He started drafting paperwork, emergency guardianship, fraud reports, revocation of any power of attorney Mara might have weaseled out of Mum or Dad. I didn't feel heroic. I felt sick. But I knew what had to happen. I went back to the house that afternoon. Mara and Trent weren't there off house hunting, according to Mum. Perfect. I didn't want a confrontation. Not yet. Mum was sitting at the kitchen table, trying to help Dad figure out some new adaptive utensils. Seeing her struggling with the simple act of getting him to hold a spoon broke something inside me a little more. "Drew?" she said, blinking in surprise. "I thought you were staying at the hotel for a while." I sat down across from them, pulled out my laptop, and hit play on the footage from the night before. I watched Mum's face drain of colour. Dad, bless him, managed to grip the armrest tighter, his fingers still weak. but his anger strong enough to move mountains. There was no denial, no bargaining, no maybe you misunderstood. They heard it. They understood it. And just like that, the illusion of family loyalty shattered. Mom pulled a stack of papers out of her purse, her hands shaking. Mara said these were just for medical bills, she whispered. Power of attorney forms, loan applications, transfer of property documents, blank spaces waiting for a trusting parent's signature. Without another word, I handed over the documents the attorney prepared. We signed everything emergency guardianship for me. Fraud protections, revocations of every authorization Mara or Trent might have tricked them into. We sealed every crack they could slip through. By the time Mara and Trent pulled into the driveway, I was ready. Not scared, not sad, just ready. The attorney arrived right on cue, briefcase in hand. He sat up at the dining room table, laying out all the papers like a general preparing for battle. Dad wheeled himself into the living room. Mom sat beside him, steady as stone. And me? I stood near the window, watching Mara and Trent climb out of their car with shopping bags swinging, laughing like they'd already won. Their laughter stopped cold the second they stepped inside. One look at the papers, at the attorney, at me. They knew. What's going on? Mara asked, her voice brittle. Trent's smile faltered. Is everything all right? Dad's voice, clearer, stronger than I'd heard in months, cut through the room like a knife. Sit down. They sat. They didn't know it yet, but their world was about to crack open at the seams. For a second, nobody said anything, just the low tick of the clock on the wall and the thick, ugly weight of the truth pressing down on all of us. Mara shifted first, setting her shopping bags down like that would somehow undo everything. Trent cleared his throat. Fake confidence. There's been some misunderstanding. I didn't even blink. I opened my laptop and played the audio clips. Their voices filled the room, cold, calculated, talking about forging signatures, stealing from Dad. By the time the last word faded, even Mara's makeup couldn't hide the way she paled. You recorded us? She whispered, voice sharp, like I had betrayed her somehow. I shrugged. After I caught Trent poking around Dad's financial files, yeah, seemed smart. The attorney didn't waste a second. He slid a thick manila folder across the table. Here's what's happening, he said, voice like iron wrapped in velvet. The accounts are locked, powers of attorney revoked. And, he smiled without humour, we've notified the authorities. I watched Trent stiffen. His whole body coiled up like he wanted to bolt. His hand twitched toward Mara, but she wasn't looking at him anymore. She was looking at Dad. At the father she'd been ready to throw under a bus. You tried to steal from us, Dad said, slow but steady, each word like a stone being placed carefully into a river. No, Daddy, you don't understand, Mara said, voice breaking. We were desperate. We just needed a little help. Dad leaned forward in his chair. You didn't ask for help. You lied. You schemed. You tried to take. Trent jumped in, desperate now. We would have paid it back. Once things stabilized, the attorney cut him off. You've already committed multiple felonies. You won't be paying anything back from prison. Right on cue, flashing blue and red lights painted the curtains. 2 officers at the door. This time it was Trent who broke first. He bolted up, knocking over a chair, shouting about how this was unfair, how we were betraying him. They cuffed him anyway. Mara? She just stood there, tears streaking down her face, as if realizing too late that some mistakes can't be sweet talked away. As they led Trent out in handcuffs, I thought I'd feel triumphant. I didn't. I just felt free. The next few weeks were a mess. Police interviews, bank affidavits, lawyer meetings. But for the first time in a long time, it felt like the mess was healing instead of spreading like rot. We found out Trent had opened credit cards under Dad's name months ago, racked up thousands in charges before the banks flagged the activity. Mara had signed papers, 2 loan applications, fake medical bills. They weren't victims. They were co-conspirators. Mara filed for divorce 2 weeks after Trent's arrest. She tried to play the innocent spouse card, crying to anyone who'd listen that she'd been tricked, that she didn't know. But receipts don't lie. Neither do recorded conversations. Turns out flaunting designer bags on Instagram paid for with stolen money doesn't look so innocent in court. Meanwhile, at home, life started to stitch itself back together. Dad's physical therapy sessions got better. Less tense, more hope. Mum slept through the night for the first time in months without waking up to check on bank accounts. We even started planning a small vacation, a real one. Not something fueled by fear, but something just for joy. And me? I stayed. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. I set up all the financial protections properly, managed their investments, made sure everything had watchdogs, locks, and alarms. Not because I believed bad things wouldn't happen again, but because I believed we'd survive them if they did. About 6 months later, Mara asked to meet. I didn't want to, but I agreed. Neutral ground, coffee shop near the courthouse, wide open spaces, lots of witnesses. You know, just in case. She looked thinner, older. Like guilt was a weight she couldn't set down. We sat across from each other, silence stretching out like a tightrope. Finally, she spoke. I didn't mean for it to go that far, she said. I thought we could fix it before anyone got hurt. I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the cream swirl. You didn't think about anyone else at all, I said. You thought about yourself. You gambled with Dad's life savings like it was a game. Mara flinched. I needed Dad to see me, to trust me, like he trusted you. There it was. Not money, not even survival. It was old wounds, childhood jealousy wrapped in adult greed. I leaned back in my chair. You could have earned that trust, I said. You chose to steal it instead, she cried. Quiet, miserable little hiccups into a paper napkin. I didn't reach across the table. I didn't comfort her. Sometimes forgiveness feels like another scam, another way you're tricked into carrying someone else's guilt for them. When I left, I felt lighter. Not vindictive, not cruel, just done. Done carrying the weight of a sister who only loved herself. Done sacrificing my peace for people who never would have done the same. Done hoping for a family that never really existed the way I dreamed it did. Dad said something the night I got back from meeting her. We were watching some old sitcom reruns, the kind he liked before everything got complicated. He patted my hand and said, slow but clear, sometimes you save your family by walking away from the ones who try to destroy it. He wasn't wrong. Mara and Trent set out to hollow out everything that mattered. Instead, they lost themselves. And me? I'm still here, still standing, still protecting the people who deserve it. The quiet ones don't scream. We don't rage. We just move the whole damn world underneath you while you're busy underestimating us. And by the time you notice, it's already too late. Story 3. Christmas morning used to be my favourite time of year. The early light slipping through the curtains, the smell of coffee brewing, the quiet hum of excitement before everyone woke up. It always felt like magic. Until this year, the year everything shattered. My name's Matt. I'm 32. I was married to Danielle, 30 for just over 6 years. Past tense. Because after what happened last Christmas is the only word that fits anymore. It started out normal enough. The whole of December was busy but nice, hanging lights around the porch, picking out a tree from the lot, arguing over whether white or coloured lights looked better. I always lost that one. Danielle had been spending a lot of time with her younger sister Paige lately. I figured it was just sisterly bonding. Girls' nights, shopping trips, endless FaceTimes, while I sat in the next room playing video games. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I was stupidly excited for Christmas this year. I'd gone out of my way to make it special, saved for months to buy Danielle this necklace she'd drooled over at a boutique downtown, a pair of noise-cancelling earbuds she'd hinted about for work, and a whole basket of that fancy skincare junk she loved but said was too expensive. Money was tight, sure, but it felt worth it. That's what you do for the person you love, right? I had no idea I was handing gifts to someone who thought of me as a joke. Around 7:00 a.m. On Christmas morning, I was up before anyone else. The house was still, the tree glowing softly in the corner, and I figured I'd whip up some coffee before the chaos of unwrapping gifts began. Danielle's parents were staying in the downstairs guest room, and Paige had the upstairs spare room. Mug in hand, I headed toward the stairs to see if anyone wanted coffee. That's when I heard it, voices upstairs, low and conspiratorial. I paused. Danielle and Paige, laughing, and then, through the barely cracked door, I heard my name. "Matt is so pathetic," Danielle said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You should see the way he lights up on Christmas morning, thinking he's crushing it with the gifts. It's honestly sad." Paige giggled. "Still using his card to buy his own presents?" "Of course," Danielle snorted. "He doesn't even check the statements. He just hands me the card and thinks he's the best husband ever. Like some trained golden retriever who just wants a pat on the head." They both burst into laughter. I stood there, frozen on the stairs, the coffee in my hand going cold. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I just listened as my wife of 6 years ripped me apart for sport. She went on, casually mentioning how she fakes every reaction to the gifts I give, how it's hilarious watching me try so hard for her, how she could never leave me, because, and I quote, "his job covers everything, and he's too easy to control." I turned around, walked back down the stairs like a ghost, and sat on the couch, staring at the twinkling lights of the Christmas tree. I must have looked completely normal. I even smiled when everyone eventually woke up, pretending I hadn't just heard the woman I loved mock me, like I was some clueless idiot. We opened presents, and I watched her put on the world's most convincing act, gasping, hugging me, showering me with thanks. I watched, too, when I unwrapped my own gifts from her, a sleek watch, top-of-the-line headphones, and a limited edition video game I'd mentioned months ago. Paid for with my own money, of course. Every thank you, I mumbled, tasted like ash in my mouth. Every smile was a lie I told myself to survive the day. After her family left on the 27th, the real work began. First, I pulled up our bank statements. I'd never thought to check them closely before, trusting, loyal idiot that I was. What I found made my stomach turn. Cash advances, secret store cards opened in my name, thousands of dollars siphoned off into random purchases labelled as groceries or bills that had nothing to do with our household. Designer handbags, spa days, weekends out with Paige, all while Danielle whined that we couldn't afford a real vacation or even a decent bathroom renovation. It wasn't just a few bad decisions. It was a years-long campaign of deceit. For 3 days, I slept maybe 2 hours a night. I went through years of financial records, screenshots, credit card bills. I stopped seeing Danielle as my wife. She became a stranger wearing her skin. She didn't notice my silence. She was too busy posting Instagram stories about how blessed she was with the perfect Christmas and her amazing husband who spoiled her rotten. The comments were nauseating. "You're so lucky." Relationship goals. Where do I find a guy like Matt? If only they knew. By New Year's Eve, something inside me broke, and not in the dramatic table-flipping way you might expect. It was quiet, cold, focused. I decided I wasn't going to scream or cry or beg. I wasn't going to give Danielle the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. No, I was going to disappear from her life so thoroughly and so efficiently that by the time she realized what was happening, it would already be over. That night, while Danielle stumbled drunkenly through the door after our friend's nigh party, having ignored me the entire evening, I stayed sober. I sat in the living room, sipping water, watching her laugh at something on her phone, probably texting Paige about what a loser I was. She had no idea that I was done playing the fool. While she passed out upstairs, I opened my laptop and made a list. A real, honest-to-God checklist of everything I needed to leave her behind without giving her a chance to trap me in emotional quicksand. The next 2 weeks were a blur of secret bank meetings, new account setups, gathering legal documents, and contacting an attorney. I played my role perfectly. At home, I was quiet, withdrawn, but not suspiciously so. I blamed work stress when she asked. She bought it without question. In her mind, I was still her predictable, obedient golden retriever. She had no idea the leash was about to snap, waking up every day pretending everything was fine. It took a toll. I'd sit across from Danielle at breakfast, her hair still messy from sleep, her voice casual and bright, like she hadn't shattered my world days earlier. She'd talk about weekend plans, ask about work, complain about Paige's latest drama. Meanwhile, all I heard was that voice in my head, "He's like a trained golden retriever." And every time I heard it, something inside me got colder, calmer. The first step was locking down my money. I spent my lunch breaks sitting in my car, away from any chance of her overhearing. I opened new bank accounts at a different branch across town, one she didn't know existed, set up new direct deposits, switched my passwords, enabled every layer of security I could. When the bank froze our joint card for suspicious activity, a little trick I arranged, Danielle texted me in a panic. "Babe, did you see? Our card's not working, WTF." I told her I'd read about a security breach in the news, said the bank was probably just being extra cautious. She bought it, hook, line, and sinker. While she slept, I downloaded years' worth of bank statements, carefully highlighting every shady charge she made. I wasn't planning to just walk away. I was building a case. A bulletproof one. Next came the living situation. Quietly, I found a small one-bedroom apartment about 20 minutes from our house. Nothing fancy, just clean, safe, private. Signed the lease under my own name, using funds from an old personal savings account Danielle had no idea existed. Originally, I'd started it to surprise her with an anniversary trip to Hawaii. Kind of ironic now, I boxed up essentials at night when Danielle was either passed out or busy on Zoom calls with her friends. Slowly, carefully. A few clothes here, a laptop charger there. Important documents got tucked away first, birth certificate, passport, work contracts. Every little piece of me I could reclaim, I did. I stopped doing her favours too, the little things that used to come so naturally, making her coffee in the morning, folding her laundry, double-checking if she wanted takeout or cooking her favourite pasta, just because I let those habits die a quiet death, she noticed. I could see it. One night, about a week before everything was set to go down, she curled up next to me on the couch and asked, "Is everything okay between us?" I didn't lie, not exactly. I said, "Just a lot on my mind." Which was true, just not in the way she thought. She smiled and kissed my cheek, like she was reassuring a sulking child. Then she went right back to texting, probably Paige, maybe someone else, who knew at that point. And me? I just watched the clock tick down. The final straw, the last confirmation I needed, came a few days before D-Day. I was coming home late from the gym when I caught Danielle on a call. She didn't hear me walk in. She was standing in the kitchen, pacing, phone tucked against her ear, voice low but clear. "I think Matt's acting weird," she said. "Like, he's suspicious. You don't think he knows, do you?" Paige's voice crackled through the speaker, laughing. "You're being paranoid. Matt's dumb as a box of rocks when it comes to this stuff. Chill. That did it. The woman I spent 6 years loving, the woman I dreamed of building a future with, didn't even respect me enough to think I could notice my own betrayal." I stood there for a moment longer, staring at her, feeling absolutely nothing. No rage, no heartbreak, no sadness, just emptiness. The kind that tells you you're done. Really, truly done. The morning Danielle was set to leave for a weekend girls' trip with Paige, I helped her pack her overnight bag, loaded it into her car, and kissed her goodbye on the driveway like it was any other Friday. She smiled so sweetly at me. "I'll miss you," she chirped. I told her, "Miss you too," even smiled back. And the second her car turned the corner, I didn't hesitate. I picked up my phone and made one call. The moving company I'd pre-scheduled was already on standby. They pulled into the driveway 20 minutes later, a big box truck rumbling like thunder. In less than 3 hours, my half of the house was stripped clean. Every item I could prove I'd paid for, my gaming setup, my personal electronics, my books, the bedroom furniture from before we got married, gone. Half the kitchen utensils, my half of the towels, even the damn coffee maker, anything even remotely joint. I left. I wasn't trying to start a war. I was just taking back what was mine. Before I walked out the front door, I set one last thing on the dining table, a thick manila envelope. Inside, printed copies of every bank statement, every receipt, every credit card bill, every transfer to Paige. A detailed spreadsheet of every dime she funneled from our accounts over the past 6 years. On top of the pile, the divorce papers, freshly signed and notarized. And right beside them, my wedding ring gleaming under the morning light. Before leaving, I sent one final text to Danielle. The golden retriever finally learned a few new tricks. Enjoy your weekend. I blocked her number right after. No drama, no screaming match, no ugly confrontation where she'd cry and make me question my decision. Just silence. A clean cut. By the time Danielle realized anything was wrong, I was already sitting on the floor of my new apartment, a pepperoni pizza on one side, a 6-pack on the other, and nothing but peace settling over me for the first time in years. The old Matt, the trusting, naive idiot, was gone. And honestly, I didn't miss him. I thought the hardest part would be leaving. Turns out, the hardest part was staying silent afterward. Because as soon as Danielle walked through that front door and found the house half empty, found the manila envelope sitting where our Christmas centerpiece used to be, she absolutely lost her mind. I wasn't there to see it, but I didn't need to be. My phone, my new number, because yeah, I'd thought of that too, started blowing up within an hour. Unknown numbers, voicemails, blocked calls, emails, Instagram DMs, even a Facebook message request from her dad of all people. I didn't answer a single one. I just sat on the floor eating cold pizza and watching the messages pile up like snowdrifts. At one point, Paige texted me from some burner number, "You're being cruel." She's devastated. Please just talk to her. I just stared at it for a second, feeling nothing. No guilt, no sadness, no anger. Just relief. For the first time in 6 years, I wasn't trapped under anyone else's expectations. I didn't even bother replying. Because what was there to say? You laughed at me for loving you. You drained my savings and called me pathetic behind my back. You mocked me with your sister and thought I was too dumb to ever catch on. There wasn't a text long enough to explain it. And even if there was, she didn't deserve the explanation. The next morning, Danielle pulled out all the stops. Posts flooded her Instagram. Sad selfies, cryptic quotes about losing your best friend. Throwback pictures of us from vacations we barely could afford because she was secretly bleeding our accounts dry. Her friends, the same ones who always told me I was such a catch, were eating it up. You two were couple goals. Don't give up on each other. Matt, if you see this, fight for her. It would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. Meanwhile, my real friends, the ones Danielle had quietly pushed out of my life over the years, started reaching out too. Jake, Miguel, even Eric, who I hadn't seen since he got married and moved across the country. They all said the same thing. Man, we were wondering what happened to you. Turns out, while I was busy being Danielle's golden retriever, she was running interference, keeping anyone who cared about me at arm's length. Typical. The next week was quiet, at least on my end. Danielle, though, not so much. From what I heard, thanks to some mutual acquaintances, she spiraled fast. Without access to my paycheck, she couldn't cover the mortgage. The secret credit card bills started catching up to her. Even Paige wasn't much help. Apparently Paige had her own financial mess to deal with. Poetic, really. The sisters who laughed about training me like a dog were now drowning without the ATM they called a husband. A few weeks later, the formal mediation for the divorce started. Danielle showed up looking like a shadow of herself, tired, hollow, messy bun, instead of her usual styled waves. When she saw me across the conference table, she actually started crying. Not angry tears, real ones. She reached for me once, hand halfway across the table, before her lawyer pulled her back gently. I didn't move. I just sat there, calm, composed, letting my attorney do all the talking. It didn't take long. I had receipts for everything, the financial abuse, the secret debts, the cash transfers to Paige. It was open and shut. She couldn't even argue. No alimony, no fighting over assets. The house would be sold, the profits split down the middle, which still felt too generous, honestly, but I didn't want any excuse for this to drag out longer than necessary. The meeting ended. And as we walked to the parking lot, Danielle tried again. Her voice was small, fragile. Matt, please, we can fix this. I'll get help. I'll change. I miss you. For a half second, I saw the girl I married, the one who used to fall asleep on my chest in college, tracing circles on my skin with her fingertips. The one who used to talk about growing old together on a porch swing somewhere in the middle of nowhere. And then, just as fast, I remembered Christmas morning, standing on the stairs, hearing her laugh at me like I was some mindless pet. The spell broke. I shook my head slowly, gently pulled my arm away when she tried to touch me. And I said the only thing that needed to be said. You don't love me, Danielle. You loved what I did for you. Those aren't the same thing. Then I got in my car and drove away without looking back. It's been almost a year now. The divorce finalized a few months later. The house sold. The last loose threads snipped clean. I still live in the little one-bedroom place. Still have the same cheap coffee maker, the same scratched-up desk I put together myself on that first night of freedom. It's not fancy. It's not Instagram perfect, but it's mine. I've reconnected with my old friends, picked up a few new hobbies, started traveling on weekends when I can, short road trips mostly. Just me, a backpack, and no one to answer to. Sometimes I still catch myself reaching for 2 coffee mugs in the morning, or pausing at a window display thinking, Danielle would love that. Old habits die slow, but they do die. And every time they do, it's like shedding another heavy, invisible weight I didn't even know I was carrying. As for Danielle, from what I hear, she's still living with Paige, still chasing the life she thought she deserved, without doing any of the work to build it. Not my problem anymore. The guy she mocked for being a trained dog finally walked away. No leash, no collar, no regrets. And standing here now, free, whole, finally myself again, I realize something. Sometimes the best revenge isn't making a scene. It isn't yelling or crying or even demanding justice. Sometimes the best revenge is just leaving and never once looking back.